I've always loved reading, but when I was younger, I read an absolutely insane amount. I just used to get so absorbed in books that I'd read them in about 2 days. I've got huge boxes of books in my house from the ones I read when I was younger. Most of it probably wasn't great looking back, but I definitely had a lot of fun getting immersed in those worlds. As I got older and acquired more hobbies and friends, I started reading less and less. I spent most of my free time either talking to friends over the internet, or watching TV or playing games. Although a lot of the time I would be out of the house. I had went from reading a minimum of 1 book a month to reading between 1 and 4 books a year in my week of summer holiday. Although I clearly still really enjoyed reading on holiday, I never continued it once I returned to a place with Netflix and YouTube and games. For some unknown reason, almost exactly a year ago, I suddenly had a lot of free time on my hands, and while enjoying my time outside in the garden, I started reading some of the books I never got around to. Once I had finished my first book, I could just not get enough. I've read around 33 books in the past 12 months, not including manga, and I've loved every second of it. A lot of people talk about being transported to different lands when they read, and that is true. But for me, it's that the different styles of writing transport me into the author's heads. Reading all these books has increased my
vocabulary
so much and made it so much easier to express my thoughts and feelings. So much so that I would probably have never started this YouTube channel if it wasn't for the books I've read. And I think my younger reading is the main reason school was so easy for me. They really just introduce you to so many different perspectives while at the same time increasing your imaginative power. Games and films are great, but my imagination felt so withered. When I started reading again, I could suddenly imagine so much more, and it increased my appreciation for the visual styles of films and games. I'm gonna go through a quick rundown of the books I read this year, and I'll give my opinions on the ones that stood out. I haven't wrote any script for this, so we'll see how it goes. The battered looking books you can probably guess are rereads. The first book I read was Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The translation I had was more focused on the musicality and rhythm rather than the content, so it was difficult to understand a lot of the time. Meditations. This Stoic tome has provided me with more wisdom than anything else this year, even if it does repeat itself. Red Rising and Golden Sun. I bought Red Rising on a whim, and because the opening was so brutal, I read the whole thing in a day. It's well paced, but it's basically just the Hunger Games. I was so desperate to see what happened I read the sequel, but after that the excitement wore off. Foundation and Empire, and Second Foundation. These 3 books were a great sci-fi adventure. The way they're made out of shorter stories at different times reminded me of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The Book of the 5 Rings, too short. Don Quixote, too long. Ready Player One, too 80s. Gods. This Terry Pratchett book was a breath of fresh air to me. After reading mostly normal dramatic stuff, adding a bit of humour into the mix made me so happy. I giggled the entire time I read this and went on to read almost every book in the series in quick succession. Plus I love dragons. Men-at-Arms, Feet of Clay, Jingo, The Fifth Elephant and Night Watch. All part of the Night Watch series of Discworld books. Start with Gods, and if you like that, you'll like these. Howl's Moving Castle. The basis for one of my favourite films, probably not as good as the movie, but still worthwhile. My Neighbor Totoro. Written after the film, it adds a lot of nice details. Totally kawaii. Good Omens. Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman together, discussing the apocalypse. What more could you want? Mort, Reaper Man, Soul Music, Hogfather, and Thief of Time. All part of the Death series of Discworld books. Death is probably my favourite character in the series, and the Hogfather made me believe in Christmas again. Mr. Twiddle Stories, a children's book I read before bed, a lot of fun. The Hobbit, the classic that started it all, a true adventure across far lands to reclaim lost gold from a dragon. The Anubis Gates. I just finished this book. I don't want to say anything else, but it's fucking insane. Well worth a read. The Complete Robot. A massive collection of Isaac Asimov stories about robots. Did you know Isaac Asimov invented the word robotics? The Necronomicon. A massive collection of H.P. Lovecraft stories. I've read some of them before, but damn does that guy know how to do eldritch horror. Good for any Bloodborne fan. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Comedy sci-fi. I've read it before, but I still can't help laughing out loud. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that reading is fucking awesome. It's a great way to increase your mental power, and if you don't like reading, I'm sure there'll be something you like somewhere. Start with something like a collection of short stories, or even manga or graphic novels, and I'm sure you'll love it. Thank you to Terry Pratchett for being a shining ray of humour in my life. Thank you to younger me for reading all those books, and thank you for watching. Cheers.